how would you describe the other relationships of other partners that you've had just in your life so far?
Rough. Like, I used to be very like, oh my God, like he's horrible. He won't do this. He won't do that. But recently I've, kind of taken a step back and been like, okay, well, he wasn't doing this, but what did you do to try to address the situation?
I love that you just said that. And I appreciate the accountability, right? Because I think that is something that is sorely being missed in a lot of cases. I think we live in a society now where it's very easy and quick for us to judge each other and to put the blame on each other. And it's really hard to just sit there and just really recognize like, hey, I did this, and maybe this is why I got the outcome that I got. So again, you initially started off therapy because of a partner. Outside of just that one, how would you describe the other relationships of other partners that you've had just in your life so far?
Rough, I would say.
Rough? Why rough?
Just because, like, I have had problems really just expressing my wants and my needs.
Okay.
I'll give it like, so on the perspective of like the guys that I would look at and say they didn't do me right. I think to take, like, I used to be very like, oh my God, like he's horrible, he won't do this, he won't do that. But recently I've, kind of taken a step back and been like, okay, well, he wasn't doing this, but what did you do to try to address the situation or try to fix it? I never spoke up. And so
It's a good reflection.
Yeah, they were not that good just because they would do stuff, but I just would never really address the situation. I would just...
Did you push back at all?
Like push back as far as...
So like if they did something that you didn't like or you disagree with, do you sit down and be like, when I say push back is in terms of confront them and say like, hey, when you did this really bothered me and I would really appreciate it if you would change that behavior or change this approach?
From what I can remember, not really. I may have like made like a passive aggressive joke about it or whatever, but for the most part, no, I never really would address it. And that's something that I've tried to do better as far as like expressing like what bothers me and things like that. But yeah, for the most part, I never really said, okay, this is what my issue is. Like, are you going to fix it or whatever? Most of the time it would literally just be passive aggressiveness, and they may not have taken me seriously, or I may have gotten shut down or like gaslit into thinking like I'm just tripping or something like that. As far as where I was the downfall of certain situations with guys that I've dated, it was more so what I was saying earlier as far as me acting like he was crazy when he would address something that I would do wrong. So literally, like, the stuff that I would get mad at guys about, I'd turn around and literally do the same thing. And that's actually something that I just realized with one of the last guys that I was dating or whatever. We weren't in a relationship or anything like that, but I had noticed that, like, oh my God, like the same thing that I was doing to so-and-so is literally like what I'm experiencing with this dude. And I'd be like, oh my God, like, is this my karma? Like, what is going on? But, for the most part, it was just me not even being able to necessarily communicate, maybe my side of the situation if he's addressing what the issue was with me, and not even being, at the time, like, mature enough to really accept that I was doing wrong. I would make them feel like they were crazy. It's bad, like when I think about it and when I reflect on it, because I'm like, oh my God, like why, you know, the same thing that I'm getting irritated with people about was the same thing that I was doing. But
that's good awareness, though.
Yeah.
That's how change happens. When you realize sometimes we create our own dysfunction. And again, it could be perpetuating from like what we experience, right? Like we've already established. But I love that you just said that. And I appreciate the accountability, right? Because I think that is something that is sorely being missed in a lot of cases where, and I'm not thinking this isn't you, this isn't any particular group, but I think we live in a society now where it's very easy and quick for us to judge each other and to put the blame on each other. And it's really hard to just sit there and just really recognize like, hey, I did this. And maybe this is why I got the outcome that I got. And maybe I need to make some adjustments in the way that I talk to people, treat myself in order to get the outcome that I want.
Yeah.
So before I go on a tangent, I want to ask you a follow-up question. If you had to kind of profile the guys that you had dated, right, to a certain degree, what are some things that they had in common that you noticed? Because obviously it didn't work with any of them up to this point, right? What are some things that you noticed? Maybe you didn't notice at the time, but you notice now that maybe helped lead to the downfall of those relationships?
I feel like it all goes down to communication.
Okay.
And I also feel like I maybe wasn't as assertive as I feel like I could have been with, of course, going back to like my wants and my needs. So like to the first guy or whatever, I remember one time, like, cause it just could never, it just never worked out. We could never get it right. And I remember there was one time where he had told me, he was just like, you know, just basically like, you're just not aggressive enough with like what you want and what you need. And I was like,
so
you're not wrong. Like that, I mean, that's basically what he said. 'Cause at that time I was still putting like a lot of the blame for like why things, you know, weren't working out. I put a lot of the blame on him. And so he like, you know, a lot of times, you know, neither of us were right. But that was the first time I was like, dang, like I really don't, you know, express like what I want. And so it's like, if neither sides are communicating, like how is any type of progress going to happen? And so it's just, you know, I'm trying to do better on my part, but it's hard when you don't have someone who can communicate in a healthy way. And I'm trying to unlearn a lot of this stuff. So the way that I might address things, like I'm still pretty shy in it. Like I may not be 100% direct with it, but at least I'm trying. And so if you have someone who is not trying at all, who's, you know, not, you know, giving anything, like, you know, I kind of end up just feeling like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? And I just end up just letting it go.
That's a beautiful point. I don't know if everybody caught that, but I will reiterate that point. Relationships take two people. You can't drag it by yourself. I mean, you can attempt to, but you will fail, and you'll fail miserably at it. You need to have both people on the same page who are willing to actually try to work through those issues. And you said communication. Communication, in my experience, particularly with couples, is 99% of the time the issue. There's like a breakdown. They stop talking. Maybe they never spoke about things before. Maybe they got used to sweeping things under the rug, pretending that things don't happen, just kind of let time elapse and hope that we just magically feel better, which is not true, and it does never work. So it shouldn't be surprising then that, again, we find ourselves in these situations that we're in. Like, to me, you made one of the hallmark points that I always like to think about and I want to remind us about. You can't get things that you want that you are unwilling to address and speak about.
Yep.
One thing that's different between men and women is that men are very direct. Like I've even had female clients, we've talked about this before, and I would always find it kind of funny. They would say things like, you know, I want to leave him the breadcrumb trail and I just want him to kind of figure it out. And I would say, I get where you're coming from, but what I'm thinking about, again, I told you I'm very outcome driven. So I say, how's that working for you? And then they would say, it's not. Like, okay, so why don't we try something different? I'm telling you that the vast majority of us are very direct. When I say us, I mean men. We're very direct. If you want something from us, the best thing you could do is sit us down, look at us, and say, hey, I would like to have a discussion with you. Do you have some time? Yeah, sweetie, sure. What's up? So these things have been going on for a little while now, and it's actually really bothered me for quite some time. And I don't know why, but I've been hesitant to speak about it, but it's really concerned me and it really bothers me. And I really want to figure out a way for us to address this issue so that I don't have to keep feeling like this anymore, because it's making me want to be distant from you. And eventually, if it continued, it would make me want to walk away from this relationship. Right?
Yeah.
That's direct. That's being assertive.
Yeah.
But if we're being intentional with people, then we would move like that. We would behave like that. We would engage in that way. Because we understand it is necessary. I understand it might feel unnatural, perhaps, for a woman to have to speak in that way. And we're certainly not saying all women, but in general, it seems to be that men would want that more direct form of communication from that female partner in order to actually address said issue so that we can move forward and hopefully come to a compromise, or realize we cannot determine a compromise and we may need to go our separate ways, but this does not need to get dragged on any further.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I agree. It sounds great. I would say that is not something that is not a skill that I have perfected yet, but it works.
Agreed.
Like it, and I don't disagree with you on anything, because a lot of times, like, the people that I've dealt with, like, they literally need you to literally sit them down and tell them exactly to their face what it is that you want. And that is something that has been a little bit difficult for me, for the one who said, like, I wasn't aggressive enough or whatever. Like, it just, there were obviously issues, like, on both sides, but, like, that's something that, like, looking back, if I could have changed it, like, I would have, been a little bit more aggressive and assertive with what I wanted and what I felt as though I needed. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I feel like it could avoid a lot of issues, arguments, this, that, and the third, if that's something that was consistent, like, across the board for, like, everyone.
Oh yeah. Who you telling? Preach to the choir. I'm with you. I mean, I see that so often. And like I said, in my clinical practice, that it's something that just fundamentally bothers me to my core, because I see people who seem very reasonable, very respectful of each other. But what I see that can happen is when you put any two people in an environment where they feel like they either need to withhold information, avoid confrontation, or avoid maybe certain levels of engagement with each other, to me, that is a disaster waiting to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but at some point it's going to blow up in your face. And I'm simply trying to inform us and give us insight to say, it doesn't have to go that way. There's usually one of two outcomes of attempting relationships, right? It works or it doesn't. If I want to know if it's going to work, I need to be willing to lay my cards on the table. Right? I got to lay my hand out there and say, this is what I've gone through. This is who I am. This is what I need. This is what I'm looking for. These are some of the goals that I have for myself and my future. Everybody ain't going to gel with that. And that's okay, because we're all different people. Just like everybody doesn't like everybody. Everybody's not attracted to everybody, because we're all different. Right? But if I don't lay my hands out there, and I'm not suggesting to do that all on the first date. I'm just saying over time, right? If I don't lay these things out with clear intention and really articulate them to one another, and then you're not doing that with me, there's all this information that I'm missing, right? Let me ask you a question. Do you like making big decisions with limited information?
Never.
So why would we do that in a relationship?
Who knows?
Why would I try to make that type of big potential lifelong decision, potential child decisions, right? There's challenges with that, risk there. Why would I do that with limited information? 10, 20, 30% of the information I need to actually have. Because we're not talking about the real stuff. What do you want for your future? Do you want a family? Do you want children? If so, how many? When would you like to be married? Do you have a career? Is your career going to be more important than your family?
Yeah, those are all good questions.
If we don't talk about that stuff and we don't lay that out in the beginning, then aren't we running the risk of just simply running into a wall at some point? And then we might actually hit that point and realize we are actually diverging, and we have been the whole time, but we never discussed it. So we didn't realize we were actually delaying something that was more or less inevitable. Not because we couldn't make it work, because we want different things. And we never shared it.
Yeah.
So you fundamentally want something different. Let me give the audience an example. So let's say I'm like, hey, I want to be married, I want children, and I want it to happen within the next 4 to 5 years. And then I'm trying to date you, and you're like, hey, I want to pursue my career for the next 9 to 10 years, and maybe I'll get married to you, and maybe I'll give you one child. We never actually discussed that. We discussed that year 3, year 4, year 5, and I'm getting more and more frustrated with you. I'm developing resentment towards you because I'm like, yo, why are you delaying this discussion? It's really bothering me. I told you this is what I need. But we're not actually engaging in that discussion. So what do you think is going to happen? It's going to end up becoming very hostile.
Yep.
Instead of us just sitting down and being the adults that we need to be and respectful of what each other's wishes are, but simply laying those points out there. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want my time wasted. So let's be honest about what we need. Yep. And if you can't give me what I need, that's cool. Let's keep it moving.
It could all be so simple.
It could be. I'm not suggesting this is a perfect world, and like there's no challenge here. What I'm saying is most of us, I think, know the longer you engage with somebody, when you eventually separate, if you end up separating from them, it hurts more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's harder.
Even if you knew it was unhealthy, it still hurts more. And then on the flip side, I would also make the case that many of us break out of relationships prematurely, and we don't do all the work necessary to make sure it could not work. We kind of make our own decisions internally and assumptions because we don't want to talk about stuff. So we walk away when we actually maybe could have made it work out. But it goes back to what you said. You have to communicate about what's important to you. Any thoughts on that?
I agree with, well, let me get towards the mic. I agree with you 100%. It's just, it can be kind of hard sometimes. But I definitely feel as though, like I had mentioned earlier, like a lot of arguments, a lot of disagreements, a lot of breakups could be avoided almost completely if like we had those conversations in the beginning. So like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be the first date, but say like a month in or whatever, you guys are enjoying each other and things like that. You want to have a conversation about like, okay, well, what's going on? Like, what are, like you said, just like asking those different types of questions as far as like their future, what they see for their future and what they have, like, goals and things that like that. Or not even necessarily a month. I don't know. Whenever you start feeling as though, okay, this is somebody that I can, vibe with. Go somewhere. Yes, exactly. So I feel like it's definitely a lot better to have those conversations sooner rather than later, because like you said, it hurts and it's hard. If it's, someone who you've been with for, several years and, you put in all of this work and stuff in a relationship only for nothing to literally come of it. And
that's facts.
Not only does it hurt, it's just a waste of time as well. Like I say personally, I hate feeling as though like my time is wasted. And so those are definitely conversations that are necessary to have when dating, just so that you know exactly what it is that you're getting into. So, I mean, at least if you've got your answers and you may not be happy with, a couple of the answers and you keep going, I mean, for the most part, the only person you gotta blame is yourself, because you knew exactly what you were getting into.
Absolutely. So. And that's why we want to have those discussions, right? So I'm not simply, at least in my opinion, I don't want us, and I find that too many of us make too many assumptions about what the other person thinks. And that's something that like I will vehemently push against because it bothers me to my core. And I mean this about everybody. I'm talking about strangers, family members, children, lovers, siblings. Like, we do way too much assuming. Like, I don't care how long you've known this person. I don't care what kind of relationship you have with this person. You're never going to know them better than they know themselves. You're never going to know why they feel the way that they do, why they think the way that they do, unless you ask them and you allow them to speak for themselves. And so often I've seen even couples who were like married and been married for 20 plus years, and they have problems with communication. One might think, how the hell does that happen? You've been together for 20 plus years. You ain't figured each other out yet? Well, you're constantly growing and evolving. You're not the same person.
Yep.
It requires actively choosing and participating each other in that relationship.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to get there. It isn't just like you get married and that's it, or you get your partner in your relationship and that's it. We just cruise control until we die. It doesn't work that way. You got to actively work on you. They have to actively work on themselves. You have to support each other. You have to align maybe the shared vision of what you want the future to be, which means you got to talk about it in order to know what that vision is, right?
Yeah.
Compromise is important. It can't just be about you. It can't just be about them. It's got to be on both sides. These are these things I don't hear us doing enough of. I'm not saying nobody's doing this, but in my clinical experience, a lot of us don't do enough of that. And then again, we're surprised at the outcome, that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I just want us to be more accountable and say, if there's things I know I need to deal with and I'm not, then don't be surprised it's not working out the way you want it. Go deal with your stuff. Go to therapy and go deal with your stuff.
Yes.
That's the greatest way you can help impact that on a personal level, because sometimes it's hard to challenge your thinking when it's already the way that you think. We're extremely biased as people, all of us. No matter how open-minded we are, we're extremely biased. We think the world operates truly from our vantage point. And that's not true. It's just the way you see it. It's just your lived experience personally. So we have to try to understand each other better, which means instead of presupposing and assuming what I think you think, I need to present you the opportunity to ask you that question and allow you to share how you feel.